Alright, today we're going to build a fire pit cover. So this is my second time to do something like this, and the first time I did it I used decking wood that came from a old deck. It was torn down and I just scavenged some of the wood and put something together, and unfortunately I should have known better. It didn't last very long because the wood was already aged and rotted. So I'm doing it right this time. Went out and bought some 1x6 cedar wood for decking and just laminated this together. So what we're going to do is walk you through the process on how I built this. These things are great for when the fire pit's not in use. You can have it as a tabletop if you like, or also when it's not in use. It helps keep leaves and debris and stuff like that from getting inside the fire pit, kind of keeping it clean for you while you're not using it. So here we are, fire pit season. Thought this might be a good time to bring this video out, and I hope you enjoy. If you like it, give me a thumbs up at the end. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, to get started, we need to do some glue up here. And unfortunately, when I started this project, I didn't think about doing a video until after I started the glue up process. And I kind of thought, hey, this might make a good video. So for now, I'll have to use some photos to kind of demonstrate what I did in the glue up process. And the first thing I needed to do was square off the edges of the 1x6 decking lumber. It comes rounded, so you have to square that off first. And I just used the table saw to do that. And then I started my glue up in 3 sections: a left section, a right section, and a middle section. And here you can see the final assembly before I do all 3 sections together. And then after I glued all 3 sections together, put them in the clamps, I needed a weight to keep everything stabilized and flat. So I just put a 25-pound weight to accomplish that on here. And then I started the video process. And here I'm just knocking off the glue bits with a hand plane and then following up with a random orbital sander to smooth things out and make it nice and clean. Now that we have the top nice and smooth from sanding, I'm focusing on cutting out the circle. And to do this, I bought a circle jig from Rockler to mount my router on. And unfortunately, it was not long enough to do the job. So I had to improvise, and I attached a piece of wood to the end of the jig, and then I used my hammer to tap onto the pivot plate that came with my router to create an impression into the wood. That impression I later used to find and drill a hole to use as a mounting point on the pivot plate. Now that we have the hole drilled, as you can see me pointing out here, I'm ready to mount the circle jig and begin routing out the circle. And when I started this process, the first time I used it, I went a little too deep on this router setting. So here you see me coming back, starting over again with a more of a shallow pass. Routing out the first part of the circle here ended up being a 2-step process. And so I had the shallow setting first to get the first initial circle put in, and then I dropped the gauge a little bit further and ended up setting the router that was about halfway through the width of the wood. And then next I followed up with my jigsaw to knock out the waste material here. And the final step will be for me to follow up with my router again, except this time I'm going to be using a guide bit to smooth out the edge of the fire pit cover. For the next step, I need to flip over the cover so that the smooth section is at the bottom of the cover here. And then I'm going to follow up with a trim router bit, which has a guide at the bottom of the bit. This guide will be a reference point on the smooth section, and then allow for a trim smooth cut for the top once I complete the rotation with the router. Now that the heavy work is done with the flush bit, I've moved on to my trim router, and I've installed a round over bit with a guide to round over the top and the bottom of the cover. This is going to give a better appearance for the cover, and it also is a nicer feel, making it easier to gain access to the top if you need to remove it. To complete the look and feel of it, I'm following up with my random orbit sander here with 220 grit to smooth everything out. Now that the top of the pit cover is complete, I can start focusing on the bottom. And one of the things I did to stabilize the fire pit cover was to build 3 stabilizers for the bottom that are going to mount to the bottom of the fire pit cover. And I just used the round over bit from the top of the cover to round over the bottom stabilizers on the fire pit cover. And again, I'm hitting it with 220 grit sandpaper. Here you can see how the stabilizers are going to be utilized, and to get things going here, I just used my tape measure to give me a rough idea of where to place the left and right stabilizer. And then I used the speed square here, which gave me a measurement from my fire pit. So I went out to the fire pit, and where you see my hands are, represents the outside of the fire pit, and then at the end of the gauge here, it represents the inside of my fire pit. And I'm just running this along the edge to make sure that the stabilizers do not interfere with the inside of the fire pit whenever I get ready to cover it up. Now that I've marked and know where to attach the stabilizers, I'm following up with some painter's tape here to tape the stabilizer in place. This will just hold it there so it doesn't move around on me whenever I follow up here later on with a drill bit to pre-drill the holes for the screws that will be used to mount the stabilizer. Now that I've pre-drilled the holes for the screws, I'm just following up with some stainless steel screws to fasten the stabilizer. Now that the stabilizers are fastened, I'm moving on to adding a raised star that I built earlier. And to mount the star, I'm putting in a screw that's going to go all the way through the bottom of the cover and protrude through the top of the cover, exposing the threads of the screw that I'm mounting here. Later on, I'll take the raised star and use those threads from the screw to mount the star. With the screw now in place, all I need to do is simply find the center point of the star and then screw it on to attach it to the cover. All right, so now we've gotten to the part that I probably enjoy the most when it comes to these projects, and that's applying the finish. It's really fun to watch the wood come to life once you apply the finish here. And in this case, this finish is giving a nice warm color to the cedar wood that we used for the project. And for this finish, I'm using Pinafin Natural Finish. It's an oil-based finish. And what I've found is that the oil-based finishes are probably the best way to go when it comes to doing a finish for outdoor furniture. And the reason is that if you use something like a polyurethane, it looks great when you first put it on, but after 2 to 3 years of use, it'll start to peel off, kind of like paint would peel off wood over time. And it's really a pain to go back and refinish it to bring it back to life. With the oil finish, much easier. It probably takes a little more maintenance. You probably want to come back and sand it down, just give it a light sanding once a year, and then put on another coat of finish to give you that natural pop that we see here. So anyway, I'm finishing it off. It takes 2 coats to finish this off. You do one heavy at first, and then you wipe off all the excess after about 20 minutes of drying, and then you come back and do it again 24 hours later, a little bit lighter coating the second time around, wipe it off, and then you're ready to display your work. All right, now that we've finished the top, I'm focusing on the bottom of the cover. And one of the things that I like to do with any outdoor piece that I build is to make sure that everything has some kind of finish on it. The only exception is going to be if you have some kind of joint that requires glue, and you don't want to be putting a finish on a glue joint because then the glue will not have a chance to adhere to the wood. So in this case, we're just fastening everything with screws, and therefore every piece of wood is going to get some kind of protection on the top and the bottom of it to prevent any kind of rot or decay later on down the road. Trust me, I've experienced this in the past where I didn't do this, and unfortunately you end up throwing your furniture out because you get the seepage of water, which causes decay, which causes it to buckle, and you have to throw out your furniture because of that. So take this extra step, you'll be thanking yourself later on. Now that each stabilizer is connected on the top and bottom, I can refasten the stabilizer. Now with the stabilizers reattached, I can begin finishing up the bottom of the cover here, and we're going to just continue to follow the process of adding a heavy coat for the first application, giving it 20 minutes, wipe it down, wait 24 hours, and then add a secondary coat, a little bit lighter this time, and wipe it back down. Now that the work has been done on applying the finish, I can reattach the star. There you go, finished product, all done, ready for the fire pit. All right, there you have it, my fire pit build. I hope you enjoyed the video, hopefully learned something, and look forward to doing this again on another project. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it, and hope you have a good one. Thank you.